Hello developers. Vagrant allows us several networking options for our development environments. In this video, we'll discuss making changes to our Vagrant file to configure the networking. Public network. The first option we're going to discuss is the public network setting. In this mode, the provider will connect our virtual machine to the network, as if it were a physical device on our host network. This will allow other computers on the same network as our host computer to access our virtual machine. Vagrant doesn't recommend this mode as Vagrant boxes are insecure by default and by design. We also don't recommend this mode, but we want to cover it for cases where we need to put the whole virtual machine on the network. To enable this feature, we need to add config.vm.network public network to our base Vagrant file. If you missed our discussion on creating a base Vagrant file, make sure you follow the link in the description below. This new configuration line will make our Vagrant file look like the following. The next time we Vagrant up or Vagrant reload our environment, we'll be presented with the following prompt asking us which network interface we want to use for the virtual machine. In this case, the host is connected to the internet through the Wi-Fi, so we'll enter a 1 and then hit return. After this, the virtual machine will continue to boot as normal. If we Vagrant SSH into our virtual machine, we can run IPA to see that our virtual machine now has an IP address of 192.168.4.50, which is on our internal network. Private network. The other networking option is a private network. In a private network, the virtual machine is connected to a virtual adapter that the provider creates that only allows traffic on the host computer and between virtual machines. To reiterate, this is our preferred method for setting up a network as it provides an extra layer of security between yourself and the outside world. To enable this feature, we need to add config.vm.network private network to our Vagrant file. We're also going to specify the IP address used by the virtual machine. The downside to this is that we have to manage what virtual machines have which IPs if we're working with multiple virtual machines. The upsides are that it makes it easier to know what the IP address is without Vagrant SSHing in, and the IP address doesn't get randomly reset, forcing us to update a bunch of configuration files. We worked on projects where the IP address wasn't specified, so trust us when we say it's less of a headache managing the IP address than having to handle IP reassignments. With this new configuration setting, our Vagrant file will look like the following. Now, if we Vagrant SSH into our virtual machine, we can see that the virtual machine is using the IP address that we statically assigned. Port mapping. The trade-off to using a private network is that the other devices on the network are unable to access the virtual machine. What if we wanted to test our application on a phone or a tablet? With our current setup, we're out of luck, but thankfully there's a solution. Vagrant allows us to set up a mapping from a port on the host machine to our guest machine using a port forward entry in a config.vm.network configuration line. For example, if we wanted to forward port 8080 on the host to port 80 in the guest, we could add the line config.vm.network forwarded port guest 80 host 8080. After we do this, our Vagrant file will look like the following. When we reload the development environment, we'll see the ports that are being forwarded show up in the output. Now we can use the host machine's IP address with a port of 8080 to access the service using port 80 in the guest. For example, our host machine's IP address is 192.168.4.21, so on our test phone we can access http://192.168.4.21, port 8080. Vagrant port. If we ever need a reminder of what ports have been forwarded, we can run Vagrant port to see the list. In our next video, we'll discuss how to access our development environment using a secure shell connection. Make sure to subscribe to get a notification when the next video is released.